The sheer mountain range of glass and steel in modern Manhattan suggests a permanent natural fixture. However, this skyline masks a history of aggressive expansion and strategic displacement that began long before the first stone was laid. In the 1500s, this was Mannahatta, a Munsee Lenape name meaning island of many hills. The Lenape managed this ecological archipelago through sophisticated landscape engineering. Using the Three Sisters method, they planted corn, beans, and squash in symbiotic clusters to maximize the soil's yield and sustain a network of permanent, multifamily settlements. The catalyst for change was a fashion craze 3,000 miles away. By the early 1600s, European demand for beaver pelt hats had stripped the continents bare. Navigators were pushed across the Atlantic to secure a new supply chain for a market that was rapidly running out of raw materials. Mapping the deep-water harbor and the Hudson's fur-bearing interior instantly rebranded the island. In the 1620s, a site of ecological sustenance was rapidly re-engineered into a massive node of global corporate extraction. The Dutch West India Company operated as a private corporate enterprise. Their 1624 founding of New Amsterdam followed a cold logic: minimize overhead and maximize the shipment of beaver pelts and timber back to Europe. To secure their inventory, the company built a massive defensive palisade across the northern edge of the settlement. This wall physically separated the WIC's commercial assets at the southern tip from the British competitors and the displaced Lenape to the north. The footprint of that 17th century barrier still dictates the geometry of the modern city. The path of the original wooden wall sits directly beneath the asphalt of what we now call Wall Street. New York's early identity grew out of a corporate charter. The city was designed from the beginning as a site of fortified, unapologetic commerce. In 1664, 4 English warships anchored in the harbor, training their cannons on the Dutch outpost. The British commander delivered a simple ultimatum: the surrender of the entire colony. Director General Peter Stuyvesant called for a defense, but the local merchant class refused to mobilize. For the men running the warehouses and shipping lanes, a military conflict was a liability that threatened to destroy their inventory and their livelihoods. The resulting handover was immediate and bloodless. The British seized the commercial hub and rebranded it as a proprietary asset for James, the Duke of York. Preserving the city's mercantile wealth outweighed any loyalty to the Dutch flag. This logic made the port an irresistible prize for empires that valued trade networks over national borders. By 1776, New York had grown into the strategic pivot point for North America. Controlling the deep-water harbor and the Hudson River corridor allowed a military force to bisect the colonies and isolate the rebellion. George Washington attempted to hold the city, but the Battle of Long Island proved disastrous for the Continental Army. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the American forces were pushed into a desperate nighttime retreat across the East River. The British military occupied the city for the next 7 years, converting the harbor into their primary base of operations. In September 1776, a fire ignited in the chaos, incinerating a quarter of the city's structures, forcing the population into shantytowns amidst the ruins. When the British finally evacuated in 1783, New York was the last major port to return to American control. Despite the fire damage, its developed infrastructure and its history as the center of British intelligence made it the only logistical choice for the new government. In 1789, it became the first capital under the U.S. Constitution. By the late 19th century, Manhattan was hitting a physical ceiling. The island was landlocked and bursting with 3 million residents. Meanwhile, the rapid growth of Chicago threatened to strip New York of its rank as the nation's largest city. Its primary rival sat directly across the East River. Brooklyn was an independent, high-density city with its own government and a fiercely protective local identity. To maintain national dominance, political lobbyists proposed absorbing Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, and the Bronx into a single Greater New York. Brooklyn fought the merger until they hit a resource wall. Their local aquifer system was failing, unable to meet the needs of a modern metropolis. The only solution was to tap into Manhattan's massive Croton aqueduct. The 1898 consolidation passed in Brooklyn by a razor-thin margin of just 277 votes. This merger resulted from resource exhaustion and a calculated drive for absolute national dominance. The result of the vote was immediate. Overnight, the new city government absorbed the surrounding counties, growing to 3.4 million residents and overtaking Chicago as the second largest city on Earth. This unified footprint allowed the city to centralize its engineering. They began carving out the subterranean networks of the first citywide subway system, physically binding the 5 boroughs together. The scale of modern New York is the direct outcome of 3 centuries of strategic displacement, corporate seizures, and aggressive geographic consumption.